I have always loved movies, but I never really paid any attention to the Oscars. Everything that I knew about the Oscars really came down to they give out awards every year. That's about it. But over the past several years, as I've learned more about film history, I became very curious as to what the Academy really was. So since award season is upon us and the Oscars are right around the corner, I thought, what better than to tell you a bit more about the history of the Academy. In the early years of film, there really wasn't anything to connect or unify the different studios in Hollywood. Come the 1920s, there was a large threat of censorship from outside the industry, from various church groups to parent-teacher associations. People within the industry began to realize that if they didn't figure out a way to police themselves, that outside censorship was inevitable. So in 1922, a group of producers hired Will H. Hayes to implement a self-policing body within the industry. But even with this introduction of the first movie production code, there was still a lot of censorship coming from outside the industry. Some states and several cities implemented their own local censorship boards, which often rejected a lot of the movies that Hayes had already approved. There were other reasons for unification too. The new trend toward unionism and technological advancements. So in January of 1927, MGM studio chief Louis B. Mayer, along with his dinner guests, actor Conrad Nagel, director Fred Niplo, and producer Fred Betson agreed that there should be one organized group that would benefit the entire industry, help solve technological problems, aid in arbitrating labor disputes, and assist Will Hayes in policing screen content. The next week, 36 people gathered together and created the International Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. The International was later dropped, leaving it as what we know today, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. The goals of the new organization were declared later that year in a statement that said, "The Academy will take aggressive action in meeting outside attacks that are unjust. It will promote harmony and solidarity among the membership and among different branches. It will reconcile internal differences that may exist or arise. It will adopt such ways and means as are proper to further the welfare and protect the honor and good repute of the profession. It will encourage the improvement and advancement of the arts and sciences of the profession by the interchange of constructive ideas and by awards of merit for distinctive achievement. It will take steps to develop the greater power and influence of the screen. In a word, the Academy proposes to do for the motion picture profession in all its branches what other great national and international bodies have done for other arts and sciences and industries." It initially started with 5 branches: producers, actors, directors, writers, and technicians. But the number of branches within the Academy have grown over the years to reflect the growth of the industry. The Academy was intended to be an exclusive invitational organization, and its opinions and actions were to be those of the organization, not necessarily the entire industry. Still to this day, the Academy is used to solve industry-wide problems, and membership is still by invitation only, based on distinctive achievement in one of the branches of the motion picture production covered by the Academy. The first decade for the Academy solidified its role within the industry. Their first order of business was a labor dispute. During this time, studios were divided by West Coast and East Coast branches, and the West Coast still had to answer to their East Coast branches. The major studios were being pressured by their East Coast branches to impose a 10% salary cut on all Hollywood studio personnel as a means of reducing production costs. Because of this, they were facing a full-scale strike by studio employees. The producers branch of the Academy stepped in to meet with the other Academy branches to discuss the proposed cut and its ramifications. They were able to get the proposed salary cut removed completely. Another very important historical event happened during the Academy's first decade: the Great Depression. Like everyone else in America at the time, the industry was suffering and studios were on the brink of bankruptcy. When FDR called a bank holiday in March of 1931, It set Hollywood executives into frenzied meetings trying to decide whether or not they should continue, to scratch production plans, or shut their doors completely. Some studios had also already suspended salaries. But the Academy jumped in during this difficult time. They formed an emergency committee and recommended a temporary pay cut of 50% for studio employees rather than completely shutting down. The Academy also made adjustments to provide additional aid to low-salaried employees. The freeze only lasted 8 weeks, but it proved successful, helping to get the badly bruised industry up and running again, and to demonstrate the value the Academy brought to the industry as a whole. During the Depression is also when many members of the growing Academy left to form the Screen Actors Guild Union. The implementation of the National Recovery Act in 1933 allowed the industry to govern itself. Because of that, a lengthy code was drawn up by the Motion Picture Code Committee and infuriated almost everyone, especially performers. Performers had no union, and they saw this as another example of the dictatorship of the big studio executives. They began to view the Academy like it was on the side of the enemy, and that it was no longer inclined to act in the best interest of actors. The strong anti-Academy resentment lasted even after the National Recovery Administration was found unconstitutional in 1935. Probably the most iconic symbol of the Academy is its statue. It was designed in 1928 by MGM's art director, Cedric Gibbons, and hasn't been altered since, except for a higher pedestal beginning in the 1940s. And this is where the all too familiar term Oscar comes from. Like I said before, I really didn't know anything about the Oscars before I started doing research, so I just assumed that Oscar was some sort of abbreviation, or perhaps it was named after someone within the industry. But the truth is that we don't actually know for sure where the nickname came from. Sometime during the first decade, around the 8th year, the statue was given the nickname of Oscar. The statuette had awkwardly been referred to as the Academy Statue, or the Golden Statue, or the Statue of Merit, but it quickly and widely became simply known as Oscar. The person responsible for giving the statue its nickname has never been conclusively documented, but 3 people have been credited over the years. The first being Margaret Herrick, the Academy's librarian and later executive director, was said to have named the statue after an uncle. Hollywood columnist Sidney Skoski claimed to have first called it Oscar after an old vaudeville joke. He was tired of finding synonyms when writing about the Academy Award statuettes. The last is actress Betty Davis, who named it after her husband, Harmon Oscar Nelson Jr., who she claimed resembled the statuette. Even though we don't know for sure the origins of the statue's nickname, we know that it came during the mid-30s and it's stuck around since then. There is so much that I didn't know about the Academy before I started doing research. Today, the Academy seems to only give out awards every year, but it does so much more than that for the industry. Now, I found most of my information from this insanely huge book, but if you want to know more about the Academy's history and not buy this book, which I do not blame you, there's actually a wonderful resource within the Academy's website that goes over their entire history. I'll have it linked down below. There is so much more that I could have talked about, but these were the most interesting things that I learned about the Academy's first decade. At first, my hope with this video was to go over the Academy's full history, but as you can see from this book, that is just way too much for one gal to go over. I thought going over the first decade of the Academy was the best place to start, since I'm assuming that most people don't really know much about the Academy. I hope that you were able to learn something fun and new about the Academy. Maybe this will make you look at the next Academy Awards a bit differently. I had so much fun learning about the Academy, and who knows, maybe down the road sometime I might go a bit more in depth or go over more of the decades if that's something that you guys would be interested in. Thank you so much for watching, and remember that no matter where you go, there you are.